You mentioned there the Special Envoy Steve Witkoff in his comments. In fact, just a few days ago, he said that Iran is a week away, just 1 week away from developing nuclear bomb-making material, as you mentioned, uranium enrichment. Does your assessment align with this? And why does Iran still have nuclear material even after the strikes by the US and Israel last year?
So I think what Steve meant by that is that Iran is left with a lot of highly enriched uranium. You know, military-grade nuclear material is 90% enriched uranium. You start at 3.5%, and then you can move to 20%, and then 60%, and then finally you get to 90%. Well, they have a lot of 60% enriched uranium. And I think what Steve was saying is if you did have an enrichment facility, and if you did have enough centrifuges, you could take the 60% enriched uranium that they have buried underground in two sites, by the way, and they could do it within a very short amount of time, a matter of days. That's what he was saying. But the enrichment facilities were destroyed. Fordo was destroyed by the American B-2 bombing. Israel hit Natanz, that enrichment facility, and then the United States bombed that as well. Another enrichment facility, the apertures leading to the outside were closed off by an American cruise missile strike. And Israel also took action, as you will recall, against centrifuge making capability, against the conversion facility that we destroyed, without which you can't build a nuclear weapon, and also against the top scientists in Iran who were working on the Iranian equivalent of the Manhattan Project. So I don't think Steve meant to say that Iran can move towards a nuclear weapon in a week. It means that they have enriched material that can become military grade within a matter of days. And that's why one of the things that would have to be resolved through any negotiating process is the 400 plus kilos of highly enriched uranium would have to be removed from Iran and diluted.
Ron, do you anticipate the current Iranian regime could collapse as part of this military action if Trump does choose to take that course of action?
For sure. Iran is very vulnerable today, much more vulnerable than it's ever been. But I assume that if the United States makes a decision to move forward with military action, my understanding is that it would be, or my assumption is that it would be very broad-based. It wouldn't be a precise attack like they did against specific enrichment facilities, but much greater action against the Iranian regime. And here it would expose the main vulnerability of Iran. The main vulnerability of Iran is that its people hate it. The Iranian people are not an enemy of the United States, of Israel, or Australia. It's the Iranian regime that is an enemy of all three of us. And it was good to learn that the Australian government had kicked out the Iranian ambassador here, who apparently was trying to foment and to support attacks against the Jewish community and others in Australia. But the Iranian people are a friend of all of us. They, I think, are going to turn the corner completely against the regime. They're going to be a partner of the United States. They're going to be a partner of the state of Israel. They've come out in the streets over many, many years, and they've gotten no support from the outside world. But when the president says something, he usually means it. And so now he's put himself in a position to act. And I think if he does act, it wouldn't surprise me that the Iranian people, that their protests against this regime would ultimately succeed. I mean, I do believe, Sharri, I believe that the Iranian regime is headed for the dustbin of history, and the sooner the better.
You're in a unique position in that you worked closely with three United States presidents, I believe, Obama, Biden and Trump. Can you share some reflections or anecdotes on your relationship with the presidents and what it was like working with them? Well, look, first of all, we were able to achieve things with all of those presidents. And yes, we had more differences with the Obama administration than we had with the Biden administration. We had more differences with the Biden administration than we had with the Trump administration. And largely that was because of the policy regarding Iran. We were really on the same page with the Trump administration during its first term in office, and I think Israel's on the same page with the Trump administration today. With Obama, he was completely moving in a different direction, and it forced the Prime Minister of Israel to actually go to Congress, if you remember that speech in 2015, and oppose the nuclear deal with Iran. He was the only leader in the entire world who publicly opposed that deal. But it was a matter of life and death for the state of Israel. So I think dealing with an administration in Washington when you're lined up on the major foreign policy priority that you have, which is a national security issue and, frankly, an existential issue for us, makes working with them so much easier. On the issue of the Palestinian file, also we were much closer to the Trump administration and through his now 5 years plus of his presidency than we were with either Obama
or President Biden, who many times often put the burden on Israel to prove that it wants to reach peace. Of course we want peace. And frankly, the Palestinian people are being educated to hate Israel. But if 6-year-old Palestinians are learning to hate Jews in their schools, and 10-year-old Palestinians are learning to hate Jews when they watch television, and 15-year-old Palestinians glorify the murderers of Jews, you're not going to be able to have peace.
Well, just on that point about the indoctrination of Palestinians to hate not just Israelis but Jews, do you think it was therefore a good idea for the Albanese government to take in nearly 3,000 Gazans? And what do you think about how the Albanese government has handled the anti-Semitism crisis over the past 2 years and its culpability in the massacre at Bondi?
So regarding Gazans, I actually don't know enough about the issue, and there were many countries who took in wounded children, and so hopefully there was some vetting process that the Australian government had so that they're not going to bring people from Gaza into communities here to foment anti-Semitism. So I really don't know enough to speak about it. I hope there was a serious vetting process. What I would tell you that my biggest disappointment beyond this with anti-Semitism was the decision of the Australian government to recognize a Palestinian state, which they did in September. And there may have been a lot of people with good intentions who thought that in doing so, they're bringing peace closer. They're not. They're not. In fact, I believe, and I said it at the time, the Prime Minister said it at the time, and I think most Israelis feel this. It's not even a political issue in our system, that it would be a big mistake to reward the Palestinian national movement with statehood after the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, when they in themselves didn't even condemn the attack. You have not only Hamas supporting it, but the Palestinian Authority. I said 85% of the Palestinians who live there were supporting the attack. So what message does it send to the Palestinians if after the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust, all of a sudden their national movement is catapulted forward? It's a very big mistake. And the other thing to understand is I wish we were dealing with Palestinians that saw statehood in the context of some sort of peace agreement. And we can argue about the two-state solution versus not the two-state solution. But it's a separate issue. They want to separate the issues of statehood from peace because they don't want a state to end the conflict. They want a state to continue the conflict. That is why we have not resolved this issue for nearly 100 years. So I think that decision was very ill-advised. It may have been well-intentioned, but very ill-advised, and it will be extremely counterproductive. It actually set peace back, and it was a very big mistake, and hopefully the government will realize that. I don't know if they can reverse this decision. Maybe a future government of Australia can, but the first rule is do no harm, and I think it was a big mistake and shouldn't be repeated.
I completely agree. All right, Ron Dermer, I really appreciate your time. I'm grateful to speak with you. Thank you so much.